Okay, so this is going to be another session, one of the more important, probably the most important session that the International Crimes Investigative Committee has ever done. And we will today interview Barrie Trower on microwaves, 3G, 4G, 5G, and on what microwave radiation does to the body, and his experience or his backdrop to all of this. So let me ask Barrie Trower to introduce himself. Barrie, how did you get into this?
I started in 1959 when I joined the military. Wanted to be a Royal Navy diver and medic, but I was 15 then. You needed to be 18 to be a medic. So I went into radar and diving. I studied all aspects of microwave irradiation. With the Royal Navy divers, microwaves are used as booby traps. So I studied microwaves as booby traps. They are also used, or they were used then, when you are dismantling a mine. If you come to the surface and dismantle a mine, somebody will beam microwaves at your brain to make you make a mistake. That was my interest in how microwaves can make you blow yourself up. Then
that was even back then in 19.
Yes, it was well established. This was established way back in the 40s. They knew this. I've got the full history of it. So I understood microwaves. Then I went in to study medicine, which is not a doctor, not a qualified doctor. I studied medicine, military medicine, and I was interested in the fact that the military were not protected against microwaves when we were taught all of the damage of microwaves. And even today, the military are not protected against microwaves. And an article I read very, very recently about pilots, military pilots with microwaves in the cockpits, they are warned not to have intercourse within 7 days of leaving the cockpit if they want a normal child. I mean, there are lots of things like this. But when I left the military, I had top security clearance and an extensive knowledge of microwaves and harm, and I went into teaching. Or can I just interrupt myself?
Of course.
My CV, because I'm often called a liar, my CV, I have been checked out 3 times. The first time I was checked out without my knowledge and without my permission by the police, MI5, MI6. The police, they checked me out because I was asked to write the safety report for their own officers. The second time I was checked out was when I retired fully and I went into teaching advanced physics and mathematics. Because you're in charge of students and you take them abroad, I was checked out by the college or by the Devon Education Authority, and they check you out right back to the age of 5, every day from 5, and the police. And finally, when I changed my job and I went to work, teach at the college, where we had adults and advanced students, again, it is their duty to check you out right back to the age of 5. And I can prove that because without my knowledge, the police published my CV and they put my degrees, my experience, It's very brief, but it's very to the point. And the fact I debriefed spies in the Cold War. So I have it authorized by the police, my CV.
Mhm.
But when I came out, there was a scheme by Sir William Melvin, or Melville, I'm not sure now, 1911. I have no idea what that stands for, but it was always told. He had a scheme where spies, terrorists, and important people, where they were sent to prison 20, 30, 40 years, most of the information, the useful information, went with them to prison, never came out in court.
Mm-hmm.
And he started a scheme that I was a part of, whereby I went in as a teacher into the maximum security wing of the maximum security prisons, and I was taught by a psychiatrist over an intensive course for 18 months to and not ask questions, but gather information. Just by talking like this, I would know who I wanted to talk to, and I would say, "That was a good game, Reiner. Let's stop for a break. I've got some coffees here," and I would make coffee, which was a luxury to them, like I'd given you a nice coffee, and we would sit down for 20 minutes, and I would just monitor anything useful being said without noting it down, without commenting, and then we would get on with the lesson. And I don't know how many of us there were. I only knew there was me, but on my course, we piled into 5 cars when we went studying, so there was more than me. And I was only allowed to brief verbally 1 of 3 people, so there was always somebody on duty. And over 11 years that I did this, it's a phenomenal amount of information you gather just from them talking general chit chat. It's amazing what comes up. And all I did was send this back from people. But they used to warn us because we had the microwave walkie-talkies, and the spies were very, very talkative people. You couldn't stop them. And they would say, "We don't use this frequency because we use that too." But when I debriefed spies, I made a list of 20, 30 frequencies, a top secret list of 30 to 40 neurological and physiological illnesses that could totally disable a human brain or human body. Today's list is around 600 pulse frequencies. And I just gathered all of this knowledge over the 11 years. And when I retired, I went into teaching. I taught advanced physics, advanced mathematics, some advanced human biology from my medicine. My first degree, I specialized in nuclear and atomic physics. My dissertation, I wrote on absorption of the far end of the microwave band into the atomic structure. My second degree, which was a higher degree, I studied environmental influences, including microwaves, on the brain and thinking processes. I have a teaching diploma in human physiology. I have written papers since the 70s on all of this, and they're still being written. I wrote a PhD listing everything to do with government And my research, the mathematics, everything, I wrote a PhD proving this. Unfortunately, then, either the chancellor of my university, Exeter, at that time, either the chancellor or the chancellor's friend, Sir Richard Dole, was the chief government scientist, and as corrupt as they come, he got wind of my PhD. He had it shredded. My doctorate was banned, and it's illegal for me to use it. But I still kept a copy of the PhD, and I can give it. I've got a copy for you.
Yes.
And that only made me more determined. Then I realized, and it's been published since, that my one particular quest is to prevent the suffering of 2 billion women, and in fact the number has grown since then, from miscarriage, stillbirth, genetically damaged children. I've written 2 papers, one because the ovaries and the placenta, that does not have the immune system that the other cellular processes in the body do. All of our cellular processes have what's known as protein 53, a nuclear core complex, and if you are attacked by radiation, they can react to protect the cellular structures. They don't always work, but they can. But within the placenta, which absorbs 70% more radiation because it's wet and floating, the 39 weeks of the baby growing, the baby does not have protein 53 or the nuclear core complex, and the brain is particularly susceptible, and the eggs which are born with the baby, the 400,000 eggs in the immature ovaries, they have no protection at all. And the main damage, there are lots of different, the baby's being attacked on several fronts. The brain, I have recently written a paper on. The water that the baby is surrounded in and is inside the baby, I have now proven through a professor. I was waiting for his research, which is now proven. I wrote a paper which has recently been translated into 84 languages in 100 countries, proving the harm to the baby. And I wrote an earlier paper for an 11-year-old girl for a legal case in the United States.
In Oregon.
So I've concentrated on preventing the suffering of women from the brain, the organs in the baby, for the full 39 weeks, for various stages, to do with all the different frequencies, to do with the cyclotronic and the circadian resonant frequencies. And as the organs grow, so the resonant frequencies then interfere with the growth of that. And one of the facts I discovered with my paper, which was co-edited, and I had it proofread by the people listed on the front. I can give you a copy today. I had it proofread by the people I listed on the front, my university mathematician and advanced physics lecturer, a lecturer of midwifery, a GP of 30 years who is an expert in microwave radiation as well, a few other people. It has been thoroughly proofread, and as I say, that has been translated into 84 languages, and I can get you an electronic copy and a signed copy from me saying it is authentic. But I can prove that, and if it is published by the World Health Organization, that two things: the mitochondrial DNA in the womb inside the baby, the mitochondrial DNA, a half of that per generation will be damaged. Now, what that means is the maths is very simple. It's like a decay curve. If you damage the mitochondrial DNA, and I'll give you the good news first, is that in every single country, only 1 in 8 children will be born alive or with genetic damage, or stillborn, or miscarried. Only 1 in 8 after 3 generations will be born alive. 7 will be damaged, either dead or damaged.
Wow.
7 out of 8 in 3 generations, and that's in 60 years. And that is government documents. They have kept it secret. As it happens, I kept the secret document, and I can give you a copy. But the bad news is the mitochondrial DNA is damaged, and any biologist and doctor will know that is irreparable. Now, if a baby is born with genetic damage, and this can be, and it is proven through epigenetics, a baby can develop cancer on the 15th day of pregnancy. The mother doesn't even know she's pregnant. She's not even missed her first period. 15th day of pregnancy, the baby, through genetics, can be born with cancer. But the bad news is that this is from the mitochondrial DNA, and it is irreparable and is transferred mother, daughter, daughter, daughter along the female line until the female line stops. So as well as having only 1 in 8 born, those that are born will have a genetic lineage of of mother, daughter, daughter, daughter permanently until you stop that line. That is one of the harms. The other comes from the damage to all of the organs over the 39 weeks of birth. And in a baby, and this is provable, there are 10,050 biological structures that can be harmed by the 600 pulse frequencies that can damage those 10,050 structures. The babies don't have a chance, and so I focused my research. I couldn't do everything for everybody. I focused my research on the prevention of the suffering of women, and this is what Exeter University banned me for 30 years from studying, which only drove me to go even more.
Did they give you a reason why they banned you?
Yes, absolutely. The academic registrar rang me up and he said, "Sir Richard Dole has said your work is too political. You are banned from the campus for 30 years.
Wow.
Or banned from the campus, and it was a professor, Professor Paul Dieppe, who trains doctors, who wanted me to give a lecture, and this was 30 years almost to the month. And I said, I'm banned from entering the campus. And he said, what tripe, only using more Anglo-Saxon words. He said, I want you to come and give a lecture to the doctors. I want you on this day. Come and give it, please. Yes, okay. And he said, I will have your ban lifted. And from then, the ban was lifted. But my work was too political. But I have the documents that prove everything I've just said. I can prove with references that have been peer-reviewed and proven.
Now, what is political about that? I mean, you were looking...
Can I just say something?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
I have the United States government. I can prove this from documents from the United States government. I can prove it from the World Health Organization documents. I have the documents that say this is top secret. What I've just said is top secret and must never be shown to the public. I have all of those documents. And the man responsible...
So it is not just Exeter University, it is the United States government, the World Health Organization.
The World Health Organization, the electrical engineer, the American Secret Services with the electrical engineers.
They all want to keep this secret from the people.
Oh, yes. And I've got the document that actually says...
So they know it, and knowingly, they continue with their microwave radiation, full well knowing that...
Continuing today, knowing the death toll for women is 2 billion. That can be proved. They are continuing with it, although I have got the documents that say from the United States, the Defense Intelligence Agency, it is saying, I'll paraphrase this, we must set a safety level whereby if the military find out how vulnerable they are, and the general public how vulnerable they are, they can never take us to court. We must set a safety level that can never be beaten in court, which they did. I have the documents to prove that they set this and they kept it secret, and they're still keeping it secret. And the man responsible, an Australian, he was head of the World Health Organization Science Microwave Department, I think. He is head of, ICNIRP, the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, paid for by the industry. I exposed him and I had him sacked, but by then the damage was done because I have spoken to many governments, and when you talk to a government, you have top security clearance to say anything, provided it is not a lie. And they say, if you lie and you are caught in a lie, you will leave that dock, your feet won't touch the ground, and you will wake up in prison, and we're talking a very long time. And I went before Professor Michael Rappacioli, head of the World Health Organization, ICNIRP, industry-led, industry-paid. And I said, after I spoke to the government, I said, the man following me is all of this. I believe he has a conflict of interest because he is on the payroll of all of these people, and he is setting a safety level that protects the industry, the government, against the people and against the military, so they can never win in court. And I said, he has a conflict of interest, and he is working on behalf of those, not you. And they said, thank you very much, Mr. Trower, we will challenge him. They did challenge him. He could not lie. He was taken to court. A barrister went to town on him, and he could not lie. He was exposed. He was sacked from the World Health Organization, sacked from everywhere. And he ended up head of ICNIRP, where he's still, I think, emeritus professor. And the last I heard, he was the emeritus professor, University of Rome. I think he's still active. But I have all the documents. But the clever part that he set, he went back to set the exposure level. He set a level that could never be taken to court. And he said, we will go back to 1953. There was an engineer called Schwartz. He set a level whereby the body should not be heated above this level within 6 minutes. And that's the level. 6 minutes. They have extended some of it to 30, but there is a 6-minute heating level. But the level where you people hold their cell phones, there are no heat sensors inside the brain. So they're holding up their phone. The brain cannot detect the heating anyway, but the safety level is only 6 minutes. After that, any child who is 1 second old can receive thousands of times that exposure 24 hours a day for life, because you're only covered, the safety level is 6 minutes. So when they say we have a safety level and all of our experiments show, and everybody like me and you are talking a load of rubbish, our experiments, and we have the best universities in the world proving this, yes, they're proving that you will not get too warm in 6 minutes. They do not take into account the electric vector on the cellular structure, the magnetic vector on the cellular structure, the circadian resonant frequencies, the cyclotronic resonant frequencies, the 600 pulse resonant frequencies, the effect on the 10,000 plus biological structures that suffer from electromagnetic radiation. And this is still going on. It is still covered up. And it's why I have given up my retirement, you've given up your retirement, and we are fighting till we draw our last breath.
Exactly.
My own particular angle is to save 2 billion women, which over 3 generations in every country in the world is going to be in, and the maths proves this. This is also published.
Barrie, one thing, it seems to me that it's not just the general public, but it's the military in particular that should be alerted to these problems.
I have documents from the military. I have research. I have 2,000 research papers here,
Mm-hmm.
and I have what I would like you to do, maybe on this visit or the next. I would like you to photograph
I will.
my index of every single paper,
Mm-hmm.
and in it I have listed the title of the paper and everything that it covers.
Very good.
I keep 2,000 papers. The military, in most cases, are 70% more danger. And I can tell you now, I have known in one case, I was contacted by Fort Bragg
Mm-hmm.
in America
Mm-hmm.
when I think it was 7 of their special servicemen came back. They are very heavy users.
Mm-hmm.
And when they came back, all 7, when they got home, some of them killed their wives.
Whoa.
Some of them beat their wives to a pulp, but they couldn't control their violence because of the pulse frequency causing the entrainment, long-term potentiation
Yes.
in the brain. And long-term potentiation, which I can explain in detail,
Yeah.
goes on for ages.
Here's 2 things I need you to know before I'll let you go, but because I don't want to forget this. I have a very good friend. I went to school with him. He is an administrative law judge in Germany. And I remember him telling me about this story. He had a case before his court of, I don't know, 5, 6, or 10 German soldiers who were exposed to radar, working with radar equipment. I forget what it is. And he's the only one, or his court is the only one who decided in favor of the soldiers. And I also remember Dr. Judy Mikovits, who is a very experienced biologist from the United States, telling me that the mass shootings, which you've read about, the first one, several of them. The first one involved 2 16, 17-year-olds. I forget the name of the place. This is in 1999. Before that, there were no mass shootings, and this happened in a community where lots of soldiers lived, and these 2 children or young teenagers who committed the crimes were sons of 2 of these soldiers. So there may have been microwaves involved in this.
The mind control programs, and the last one I know by Reagan, that was authorized in the 90s when Reagan was president, he reauthorized it. Reauthorized it. They are still going on today.
Mm-hmm.
There are many of them. And I mean, I'm trained in microwave warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And I can explain it. I mean, you can stop Olympic athletes mid-stride.
Wow.
With a pulse, and I often get calls about that. But it is known, and I can go through the brain. I've studied the brain. I've written papers on the brain. I know exactly the pulses, and this was I can run through the history.
Mm-hmm.
But we could get people to do this in the 40s.
Wow. Way back then.
Way back then, the brain frequencies, and of course the knowledge is gaining, but in the 40s and 50s, you could get people to brainwashing. It is incredibly easy.
Mm-hmm.
The average person can be trained to kill like those kids within 30 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I could brainwash an ordinary person in 30 hours. It's funny, but they tend to.
You mean you can make totally normal people act like mass murderers?
Absolutely, and I've seen people with microwaves. I've seen a man in a ball ring have a ball charge, flick a switch, all stop still.
So that's what it was.
Yeah.
I've heard about these stories. I didn't know it was microwaves.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, I could talk for a month on but you can program people to do it, and people are being programmed to do it.
Mhm.
And you need to ask me about this, because the governments, or the governments within governments,
Mhm. The deep state. Mhm.
Reagan authorized the last one in the 90s, and it's still going.
Mhm.
You've got to know, it makes sense. If you want to invade a country like Russia is invading Ukraine at the moment,
Mhm.
it's a lot easier with something like HAARP
Mhm.
to just beam the microwaves down,
Mhm.
subdue everybody, because you know the frequencies. You can do it. You can have microwave warfare. You have germ warfare,
Mhm.
microbiological warfare from microwaves, which was common in the 60s, where you can give. You'll have to ask me about it.
Yeah.
You can do any. You can have biological warfare, germ warfare, people warfare, and you can do we microwave the women at Greenham Common protesting against missiles in England to give them all cancer. We microwave the Catholics in Northern Ireland to give them brain tumours and cancer. It's been going on forever.
Oh my God.
It's been going on forever, and it is documented, and I've got the documents.
And the two children who committed the crimes, they were sons of military personnel. She couldn't make any sense of it. But now that you're talking about how they're using microwaves, now it all makes sense to me.
The funny thing is, the pulse frequencies, for instance, one of the ones used in ordinary cell phones, Wi-Fi, is known to cause sexual aggression.
Oh, that makes sense even more. And how do they use these? This is a weapon, obviously. How do they target people, specific people?
The one thing I've not understood is the people being targeted tend to be ex-military, connected with the military, connected with the government, children of people connected to the government. But the people being targeted, when they phone me, they either worked in some defence thing, but it's very rare to get somebody who has not had a tie somewhere
with the military,
or the military, or weapons.
That's how we have to make sense of this somehow.
I think it's because you're easily tracked and easily traced.
That explains it, yes.
But I mean, I know of 8, very recently, I know of 8 service personnel who have acted right out of character and killed somebody on the battlefield who is just injured and laying there or whatever. But I've known 8, and I published a little paper on it. I've got the little paper through there. That I know of 8 people in the military get a life sentence in a military prison, which can't be very nice, for unprofessional behaviour, killing somebody. When I know it's the microwave, they're behaving the way the microwaves would predict they would behave.
You're not certain that this is the result of microwave radiation, but you would suspect that it is.
They follow.
Because they acted totally out of character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when you listen. Yeah, I mean, I was in the military, and you are trained and trained and trained not to panic, to keep your head in the worst of worst situations.
Yes.
But to have a military personnel panic all of a sudden and just shoot somebody for no reason, it goes against everything they've been trained for.
Yeah.
And the same with, there was a big train crash a couple of years ago, a big train crash where the driver went too fast around the bend in Europe somewhere. Too fast around the bend.
I think it was in the United States someplace, but I'm not sure. No, in Italy, I believe.
That's it. And the one thing that I picked up was that the driver was talking on a cell phone at the time.
Yes, I read that.
And you know, it can. People underestimate the power of what the pulse frequency and the waves can do to the brain.
So the first time you got in touch, just to sum this up as far as your background is concerned, the first time you got in touch with this is when you wanted to become a Navy diver, and that's when you learned about microwaves.
Absolutely. But even before then, I wanted to study medicine and diving, and they said, they gave me some sort of test, and they said, you'll be good at radar. Okay, microwaves. But my very first lecture, I had to pass exams to get in 1959, to get in at 1960. My very first lecture in 1960 in microwaves to do with diving and radar was the instructor. He came out and he said, if any of you in military words want to use that thing dangling between your legs that you don't know what it's for yet, don't expose it to microwave irradiation. Don't expose your brain to microwaves. The first thing we're going to do for the first day is learn how not to microwave ourselves. And they drummed it into you that if you were going where there was a transmitter, like an ordinary phone, it had to, before you went in the room, it had to be turned off. The key was padlocked. The key from the padlock went to the officer of the day, so you could work in there safely. And when you left and they wanted the microwaves on, the officer of the day demonstrated the room was safe, and then unlocked it, and that they were switched on again. The same if you needed to climb the mast. And we were taught to dismantle all of our bombs, mines, underwater, because they would have a sniper, only with that, not with a gun, but with a microwave beam.
Now it makes sense to me. Now it makes sense. So that's what you had to be. That's what you had to be aware of. That they're snipers, instead of using guns, they were using microwaves in order to keep you from. From defusing the bombs or the mines.
It causes confusion. So it's bad enough defusing a mine or a bomb underwater anyway, because they have other booby traps. And you follow a very strict protocol of not magnetic knives, no form of light, because they have light sensors. And you just know not to break the surface. And only very recently, I did over there. I had a call from a psychiatrist who said, "I'm getting reports that children using cell phones, and it is known and published and made top secret now, but known and published, that a child using a cell phone for 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, a 2-minute call, the brain will be entrained for 2 hours afterwards." Now, it's not a linear scale, but after 2 minutes, just a 2-minute call, now imagine a child in the playground. I'm over here, you've got a bag of crisps. You have what's known as entrainment of the brain, where the waves are coming in, that hundreds of millions a second coming in. And the easiest way to explain it is, if a child is jumping on a trampoline, the child will come to its own rhythm. If a 20-stone man comes on and jumps, the child will have to jump at the man's rhythm.
Yeah.
That is called entrainment. You automatically entrain the waves that you are affecting in the brain.
It's a kind of synchronizing moment then.
And if the man then jumped off the trampoline, you would carry on bouncing at his rate until you got back to yours.
Yeah.
That is long-term potentiation. And long-term potentiation in terms of military people can last easily 6 weeks. Easily 6 weeks.
But they're totally unaware of this.
They're totally unaware of it. And it is estimated to be responsible, I've got the article, it's estimated to be responsible for a certain number of plane crashes with jet fighters, or misdemeanors with jet fighters, where it is put down into pilot error. The military are not told, they're not even aware.
So this, I'm speculating here, but in the 1960s and 70s, I believe, we had major casualties in Germany of the Air Force flying American starfighters.
Yeah.
That may have something to do with it, right?
Because the cockpit is like the inside of a cell phone. And I'll just get my little drawing of the brain, just to hold.
Sure.
I'll keep talking. I had a call from a psychiatrist. Asking why, when children get off their phones, the behaviour for different children is different. Was there any reasonable explanation?
Yeah.
And I said, yes, it's always an explanation. And he said, without going into massive amounts of research and taking months, he said, can you sort of write me an essay on roughly what happens that I can use for my lectures? And I said, yes, of course I can. And I'll get it here. 1, 2, 3. And it is copyright free. Absolutely copyright free. Anybody with anything I'd ever written can take it out, put paragraphs in their work, sign the bottom. I mean, a lot of people do it, and I recognise my writing, and I'm pleased that they are adding to my knowledge with their knowledge. But I'll hold this up.
I'll come over and I can film it.
It's only 3, but I've listed. I'll just hold this up. What I did on the front page, I gave an explanation.
I'll come over.
I gave an explanation of why it works, because you're changing the entropy of the brain, second law of thermodynamics.
Yeah.
I gave a law of why it happens. I referenced the 2 main articles I read, Scientific American special edition of the brain, and what's that one? National Geographic special edition of the brain. And I listed the areas of the brain there. Now, and I said it depends the angle that you hold.
Yeah.
That you hold the cell phone.
Yeah.
And I've written a list of all of these different parts of the brain and how microwaves can affect them. You can take this with you.
Okay, great.
And as all the parts of the brain I've numbered.
It's extremely important.
Yeah.
It's all of this in a nutshell, so to speak.
Yeah. All of this, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. So, one thing I can give you before you go, I can.
We will stay in touch, Barrie.
Okay.
We will stay in touch.
Before you go today. If you can download a USB stick.
Yes, I can. I have it with me.
I've got my PhD on it with most of the government top secret papers. And my research, not just top secret papers, my general research into, on 2 occasions, we have a festival here, the Glastonbury Festival.
I've heard about it.
The Glastonbury Festival. It's a big love camp of music and people who want to save the environment. It's famous world over. And twice I have been invited to give the environmental lecture at the festival. They are on the USB stick. My lecture on the economy and why this is sort of eco side. I mentioned earlier I was a guest of a king in Africa. I'd been the guest of 7 royals.
All of them in Africa?
Oh, no, around the world.
All around the world.
In Africa, I was the guest of a king, and he was what we call an Oxbridge lawyer in his own right.
Yeah.
It means he's been to Oxford or Cambridge and got a law degree.
Yeah.
And I stayed with him for 2 days, and he said, Barrie, they don't ask kings. He said, Barrie, you're going to give a lecture tomorrow to all of my scientists, myself, other people with the know. He said, I'm going to have every word you say taken down. Every word.
That's what we're doing too.
Taken down. He said, I'm going to have it typed up. I want to take this to court and I want to win. Fair enough. So I prepared my lecture, gave my lecture to the king and everybody, and it's on the USB stick. I think it's the only document without a title. It starts with the word origins, where I just talk about microwaves for a little while.
Yeah.
But in it, I mention, and I'm still on my women's theme a bit, I mention that I think in France and Spain, they did a sweep right across France and Spain just over a week with schools with transmitters in the playground. and they found 200 scores where there were 8 different types of cancer that could be attributed to the microwaves just on that one sweep. 200 scores. But I can give you a copy of my other paper before you go today. The one, because it's not on the USB stick, the one where that's been translated into 84 languages. And I've proven, I was waiting for a professor to do an experiment on water, which he did, which matched my mathematics, and now it's proven. I'll give you a copy of that before you go. So, and my biography from the sleep.
Barrie, you're being too modest about these things, but we forgot to mention what kind of degrees you hold. You're not just someone who's read up on this, but you have delved into these topics in a very scientific manner.
I studied the effect of microwaves on the brain. That was shredded. After a piece I managed.
That was supposed to be your dissertation, the PhD dissertation.
Yeah. And most of that was shredded. And the smart move that they did, they destroyed my PhD. Well, they say they destroyed it. They may have sent it to the government.
But you still have a copy of it, don't you?
You're getting
excellent.
Apart from the joined up, where this goes into this, which goes into this, the few sentences that join the categories.
Yeah.
You'll need to photograph. There are 5 sections, and there are between, I think, 20 and 30 different parts to each section, where I've covered government, injuries to women, injuries to children, the environment,
the role of the WHO.
Yeah, I've covered everything. But
what role do they play in this?
They are suppressing it.
They're suppressing it.
Suppressing it to this day. And they really got no choice now, because in my legal bunch, which I have over there, I have research from legal firms, and maybe tomorrow I'll read you some of the I have research from legal firms, and what they basically say is they list, I think, 4 or 5 national and international laws that are violated. I can read them out to you. And they also say that they come where the polluter or the polluter pays the principal. In other words, if you're the one that does the harm, you pay everything to repair it.
It's a very simple legal principle, actually.
Yeah. The polluter pays the principal. That is enshrined in law. And apart from the other laws that are being broken, and they can't afford now to say, whoops, we're sorry, because there already are, but there would be world-class actions everywhere. The industry's shares would plummet overnight.
Obviously.
Trillionaires would be out on the streets. Everything would be confiscated by governments.
By the people, probably, because we first have to restore.
I think there would be riots.
I do too.
Which we are beginning to see, where people have been deliberately allowed to die to keep secrets. So when this bubble bursts, and it is already bursting, and I have corroborated evidence of everything, it's already bursting. and they are now afraid. And we are talking about, in some countries, death sentences, and in other countries, life imprisonment. So you're going from being a billionaire to life imprisonment, and they are now terrified. Here, the case I'm involved in here, Michael Mansfield, here sing, Michael Mansfield, shut up these doors because of the rain.
That's all right. Doesn't bother us.
Michael Mansfield, who is a qualified judge, he is fighting on behalf of the people. He is a human rights judge. He sent his barrister, who is a lawyer, he sent his barrister here with a legal assistant. They stayed for 2 days. The first day, they photographed all of my references till 2 o'clock in the morning. The second day was questions, and I have read in a document that has just come out that they have won, and they are going on 5 violations of law, where the people have been violated with their rights. They have won the first legal case. It's now gone to the higher court, where they have won, and it's now going to a higher court, where we're waiting for the court dates.
That is here in England.
Yeah, courts of justice.
Very good.
So,
But again, as you mentioned before, this is not being reported on the mainstream media because they're under control of, I don't know, 6 families or something.
the people that are responsible have already delegated responsibility. So the people that will end up with the death sentences and the life imprisonments, they are the ones panicking because they are the ones responsible.
Yeah.
They said, we said, and I have got the one document that can win any legal argument that you have in court. And it's from the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, ICNR. All European countries, as well as the Five Eyes, which is United States, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, they all follow under Michael Rappaccini, and they all follow the International Commission 6-minute rule. But one thing that
which was designed to keep these people from winning these cases in a court of law.
Yeah.
But if that is their intention, then it will defeat itself. It's self-destructive because that shows intent.
They have cleared themselves. So it falls to the next layer of government. They've cleared themselves because as I go around the world, I say, and I can read it to you tomorrow or today, and I published it, I say, when I talk to government, they all quote ICNR to me. It is safe. My one question to them is, have you read the ICNR report in Italy? Nobody. Nobody has read it. That it is taken on spoken word that somebody who is going to get very, very rich is spoken to by Ignat, like Rapatoli. We guarantee all our scientists everything. Here it is, safe. Forget the 6 minute bit.
Yeah.
Safe. That'll do. And by introducing this, you will all become shareholders, whatever it is. Have you read it? In 30 years of traveling the world, I've never met a single person that has read it, other than me. And I have. And I started to read it. They published it in some science journal. And it's on page 500 and something. And then, and the next page. And then I got to the bit that clears Ignat. It says, this is, I'll paraphrase, it says, and it's only a couple of sentences, this is an advisory recommendation only for thermal absorption for 6 minutes. Decision makers need to take into account that sick people, the elderly, children, the vulnerable, the sensitive may need a different safety level than the rest of the population. Very small print. And again, very small print. Decision makers should read current scientific literature and set a safe level that will err in the safety of the person being irradiated. They have totally cleared themselves.
Wow.
Not one person has read it, which puts all of them responsible. Because when I talk to councils and I say, I'm not going to embarrass you or governments, but I wonder how many of you have read it, and you see that heads drop. And I say, this is what you have agreed to, and this bit interests me. Before making your decision, you are required to read current safety or scientific literature and err on the side of safety and set appropriate reduction standards. And I say to them, I say, now, I advise on this, and I always have, as I have here, 2,000 of the most recent scientific documents. And anyone here, and they do, anyone here can go through the 19 bundles of documents, plus my lectures. You can pick out any research paper, anyone, on camera and say, explain this, and I will. I can explain all 2,000 causes. And I say, that is what I believe is my interpretation of reading scientific literature is. And if you find yourself not qualified to read scientific literature, then you call in people like me, as many as it takes for your full understanding. And they don't do that. You are given, when you talk to councils, you are given 3 minutes to talk. 3 minutes. When you question council people that have made decisions, you are only allowed 3 questions, they must give you the brief of their decision-making in full before the trial starts, and they bring it over and put it on your lap the second the judge comes out, so you don't have to read it. I mean, you've got to go on spec. But they are clearing the layers, and ICMA are totally clear. It's the decision makers now, the members of parliament, the members of government, the councillors, town councillors, local councillors. They are the people who have not read their research.
They set them all up. They're the fall guys.
They're fall guys.
I wonder if they know it. Well,
They don't know it.
they're going to find out.
They don't know it. And this is why they're...
We're going to make sure they find out.
Yeah, this is why they're panicking. But I have, for your team, every document I have referenced, saying that where it is in the heap. So, for instance, if you wanted the document on military personnel or something, we just run down the list, military personnel, number 18, there it is.
Perfect.
I've got all 19 bundles of documentation here, all indexed. I have a colleague who is a whistleblower, the same as me, Jerry Flynn. Heard of him?
I've heard the name, yes.
I have worked with Jerry Flynn for many, many years. We consider ourselves friends. He dedicates his books to me, and I peer review his work. And he has written 2 books, they're there, listing all of the Cold War. I've got both his books up there on the shelf there. He has written 2 books listing all of the Cold War decisions, because all of this was known. And if I read out a very short list, you would be amazed that everything was known, certainly by the late 50s, the 60s. We knew it all. And they're following the same tactics that was followed with smoking, that was linked to cancer in 1890 something, and that was sat on, of course. Asbestos, Agent Orange, lead in petrol. They were all known, and they're following the same procedures with this.
And now we're coming real close to showing the same things about vaccinations in general.
We're coming close now. We're not guessing that. And there's going to be a lot of people, I think, very, very scared and could be executed for this. I mean, we're talking of suffering and death in the billions. And some of with Jerry Flynn's books, what I have done, I recommend they're only $9 each, and it's for charity. He has listed every major decision to do with the government, the United States, industry, electrical engineer cover-up. Every cover-up, he has listed where the decision was made, when it was made, the website, who to contact, how to prove it. And he has gone right from the beginning where I come from in the Cold War, when I debriefed spies for 11 years.
I was going to ask a question about that.
Please do.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've also done, I have indexed both Jerry Flynn's books from start to finish, every page, every topic. So if you wanted something to do with 5G, a 5G weapon, the growler as it's known, how it's used, all of this, you just go down my index, book 2, page 53, dog. I've indexed all 2,000 things here, including my own research. So if you want something, it's here. And you're coming on to spies, okay?
I was just going to ask, because you mentioned that after your military training, you stayed with the military, but you were part of the intelligence services, I assume?
Absolutely. It was very, very undercover. Sir William Melvin, 1911. It's Melville or Melvin, 1911. I don't know what that means, but you don't just suddenly join. You're eked in over a period where somebody says, "Oh, can you do this?" You're qualified, and you're in it.
Today, I guess they would call this nudging.
Yeah, you're in, and they said you have a very good knowledge for understanding people. We're talking to spies and that. We think you'll be good at this, and that's how it goes. But, sorry, what's your question?
The question is, when you said you were debriefing spies, that's from the former Soviet Union, or back then it still existed.
So secret, because we had it was interesting, and I've had the most interesting cups of coffee with people that you would be afraid to take home and introduce to your granny for a cup of tea. But we were undercover, and it was so secret that it was on a need to know basis, because we had traitors in MI5, traitors in MI6. We had MI6 is all overseas spying, MI5 is all internal spying. We had traitors in the police. Where I worked in the maximum security prison in Wilwood Scrubs and Bald Hall women for a while, where I worked maximum security and within the education department, some of the officers were traitors. And one of the things I was told to look out for so MI5, MI6, nobody could know what I was doing because you only had to be discovered. And basically, and I was discovered, and I had my spines broken on the way home.
You were attacked.
I was hit and run. I was discovered. I was asked to look into 2 Middle Eastern spies, and I got complacent, or I'm not afraid to admit they were better trained and more clever than I was, which has to happen at some stage. And I think they twigged that I was listening. A person looks different when they're listening. And I probably dropped my guard maybe for 5-10 seconds, but that's all you need if you're watching somebody. And I'm cycling home from the college, and a car was waiting on the slope as I was going bang, broken spine, and people rushed up and said, "I'm your witness. here's my name and address, I'm your witness, here's my name and address, we'll give evidence in court for you. When it came to court, they were all fictitious. Everyone was fictitious.
Wow.
And
the whole thing was staged.
Well, I believe it was staged. I couldn't prove it wasn't, because the person that run me over died and everyone else was fictitious. And the barrister representing me said, well, you know, I knew what had gone on, but I couldn't say to them what had gone on. So, but I spent 6 years learning to walk again, and I did it underwater. Because I knew the value of water being a diver. Yeah. And I learned to walk underwater. I carried on researching, writing papers, and I did one of my degrees when I studied nuclear atomic physics. I went more into that, more into microwaves on the brain. And then when I came out from hospital, I got a job teaching advanced mathematics, microwaves, and even then I was targeted. I got a job teaching, as I said, advanced subjects, and I had a phone call, because when you've been in my profession, the people that know always know. And I had a call from, I won't say what the country is, I had a call from one country, and the embassy rang me from that country and said, do you know this scientist? And I said, absolutely, I've been working with him for many years. And we follow the same theme. And they said, well, oddly enough, the day before his wedding, he's decided to hang himself. And before he hung himself, he destroyed or hid all of his documents. And we want to know what it was he was working on, because we think he was working on something that involves spying, and we need to know what it is, who's spying on us. And I said, I can tell you exactly what he was working on. And he had found that another country had built little chips into the ordinary microwave systems and were eavesdropping on all of the government and industry and everything, coded conversations. They were listening to that. And they said, well, look, could you help us out and tell us exactly what it is? And I did. So I wrote it all down. I sent it to recorded delivery to their embassy to go diplomatic mail to the embassy. Thank you very much. We've got everything we know. We've got everything we know, and we know how to go about taking all these things out. Thank you very much. You saved a country. That's what I do. And as a closing thing, he said, oh, to let you know that we are convinced by the knots and our investigation that obviously this chap was hanged because he discovered what it was, and they needed to silence him. And he said to me, watch your back. Thanks very much. And I thought, well, hang on. I'm teaching, albeit A-level, who are 18, pre-university. And I said, now, my schedule for the college teaching A-level, advanced level, is known. It's published. It's on the internet. I am teaching this and this and this and this in rooms this and this. And I thought, anybody that now wants to silence me, and it's a risk you take. When I spoke to the Welsh Assembly, in the Welsh Assembly building, and that's on record, I paid tribute to 8 people like me that had all committed suicide.
But maybe they didn't.
Well, maybe they didn't. I mean, I hope I live up to prayer. That's my hope. I trust in prayer, and my gold medal. But I thought, if I go in tomorrow and they know I'm here, all they've got to do is put a bomb under my motorcycle or car, and as the children are coming out, bang, and 100 of them lose their legs. And I thought, this could be worrying. I rang the principal, who was a very, very close friend, and I said, look, I'll tell you on a need-to-know basis. And she said, hang on, I'll ring the council. And they rang me back about midnight and said, you're banned from the campus as of now permanently. And I said, look, I can't be. I've marked all their exam papers. Their university grade depends on what I've just written. I've got to take it in and put it in my filing cabinet, ready for the examinations officer to take. And they said, well, go in now, we'll open up the school. And I went in sometime 2 o'clock in the morning, put all the examination results in, handed over the keys, handed over my pass, joined help, and that was that. But the same was with when you said, who knows? And there's a very interesting point with this. Nobody was allowed to know what I was doing, because in those days, if you were homosexual, or gay as it's called now, that was illegal. And as well as tracking spies, terrorists, all the other people, I was also asked to find anybody that was homosexual within any government department. Because some of the prisoners would say, I'm okay because I've got Lord somebody or Sir somebody who's my best friend, and he is representing me legally, where you've got then sort of £1,000 an hour barrister turning up, which is around 100,000 today, turning up to make sure he gets all of his rights. And illegally, the legal sessions when the barrister turned up were tapes where they shouldn't have been, and found that this chap was homosexual. And if you're homosexual, then you are eligible for blackmail.
Of course.
And
we've had these stories in the German army in the 1970s.
Blunt, McLean, Philby, our top spies were, I think, most were homosexual, all bisexual, which seems to be a paid thing from public school. And they could all be blackmailed. So I was asked to look out for those and pick up conversations, because if you are Sir somebody, Lord somebody, the Chief of Police, a Member of Parliament, House of Lords, and you are homosexual, the minimum sentence then in those days was 18 years. But it wasn't 18 years in among the population. It was 18 years in segregation, in a concrete box, in segregation on your own. Because as well as and I was the only one of the very few people in the prison that I had full legal access to everybody in the segregation unit, and they were paedophiles, worse than paedophiles, child killers, homosexuals, the worst of the worst in segregation. Because if they were put in the general population, they would be killed within an hour. Or prisoners had gone out and raped other prisoners' wives there and there. People like that. But by law, they had to have an hour's education. I was in charge of physical education, health and well-being, and helping if they were doing open university courses to help them write their essays and stuff. And I had full access to them an hour a day. So all of the people there I had access to, and I could pass on the names to my 3 people. But it was 18 years in solitary, and because of the nature, and the population couldn't distinguish between paedophiles, mass killer murderers, and everything. They were all tarred with the same brush. And of course, anyone they pulled across that told authorities what another prisoner was doing and got him an extra few years, they went in there. Because there were efforts made all the time to grind up razor blades, put it in their mashed potato.
Oh my God.
They would put razor blades in soap. Anything they could get in there, the mass population, they hated those. And it was really a sport, if you like, because we've got nothing else to do. Let's target those. How can we get some sort of poison in their meal? How can we get this into there? Where are their weaknesses? And it was really, how can we do it? Just to pass the time. And I went in there and I spoke to them. And I knew, but in this, I found out all the laws, the surge, the SIRS, all the top government, and I found 16 top government people, homosexuals, who were capable of being blackmailed. And because they could be blackmailed...
They were all incarcerated?
Yeah. Because they could be blackmailed, well, no, they were not incarcerated, they were active.
Oh, I see.
So if I'm listening to you and you're telling me about Lord somebody, or somebody who's the head of MI5 as they were, MI6 as they were, I can get a message saying, well, look, the emphasis was, I've got to tell my wife, I've got to let the camera go. The emphasis was, if I was clever enough to detect them, so could the KGB. And I knew all of KGB training. I knew where they were trained. I knew how they were trained. I knew what the training consisted of. I knew how many came across a day. I knew how they got their birth certificates, passports, everything to stay in the country. I knew anything to do with spies, I knew.
Mhm. So you basically, what your advantage is over most people is that you've seen it from both sides. You know about microwave radiation and what it does, and you know about clandestine operations.
I am only, as far as I know, I am the only one in the world with my knowledge.
I believe it.
The only one in the world with my knowledge, my documents I don't keep here, so they need to burn the place down. Apart from Jerry Flynn, who I think I know more than he does, I knew more than anybody else because of my daily contact. And of the 25 of us on my course, there were only a few of us that were military, and the military people were not my military. So when it comes to military, I am the only one, as far as I know, that knows what I know, apart from Jerry. The man I admire, really, John, they call him Jack Kennedy, PT 105, the Navy man.
I remember that book.
PT 109. He's Navy, I'm Navy. I admire his loyalty to his crew in rescuing them. I've admired him right the way through. He went and spoke to a university. I've got the reference and the date. He went and spoke to a university about all of this. He made it his business to find out from all of our documents. He made it his business.
He made it his business to expose all of them.
To expose it. He went to a university and said, this is what you are going to be exposed to. This is what people being brainwashed, if you like, are being exposed to. Counterintelligence and all that being taking place. He gave it to the university. 10 days later, he was shot. 10 days later.
In November of 1963.
Now, what's the coincidence? What's the coincidence of that?
Yeah, there's not just correlation, there's causation.
He said to the university, and I've got some of the words, he said, I am going to expose everybody here. And he was president. 10 days later, he was shot.
He was going to expose the whole cabal, so to speak.
He was going to expose everything.
Freemasonry, the Anglo-American financial mafia.
He was shot, and all the papers disappeared. But I'd love to talk to Robert Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr. How to stop 2 billion people suffering, 2 billion women suffering, and I'd love to have a judge to go into court with my evidence, or have a judge come here, give all of my evidence, sign an affidavit, produce the proof, so that if I do die,
the evidence is still there.
And you can set, then any lawyer say, we've got it here. So it's not lost. My fear is that everything's going to get lost.
I don't think it will.
But I want to give you the paper that proves everything. You've got the brain one. I want to give you the other one now, that's not on the USB stick. You'll find a lot on the USB stick. My confidential document to the police, you'll find interesting, because what Europe doesn't know, the Tetra airwave system that I was asked to study, what I found out, and I got the documents, is that the American Secret Service have access to all of the codes for all of Europe using the same system our police are using. Bush didn't ask, he told Blair, get this system out with your police. Then we'll flog it, or we'll recommend it to the rest of Europe and other countries. The gubbins in this system is Motorola. The American government, by law, must have all Motorola secret keys. So for the last 22 years, and it's on my report on the USB stick, for the last 22 years, the American government have listened to every secret government, spy, police, emergency service call from all of the European countries, including Australia, New Zealand, and UK. They're just sitting back, taking it all in. And that's on my USB stick with the Russian Secret Service. Actually, well, I tell a lie. They've been in touch with me. Because a lot of their papers were destroyed. And the one they particularly wanted, I have, which proves that the Russians experimented on 79 people, many large cattle, animals, other animals, with 5G. They experimented on them for 15 hours. They all developed over 15 hours life-threatening illnesses. You and the rest of us are being exposed to more than twice the amount the Soviets said can kill you.
Wow.
More than twice.
How is that?
And I've got the document, and I've got all the proof. And 5G is a weapon. It's called the growler. It's used to, one of the frequencies is used to just make troops fall straight down. They just totally confuse their brains. Is a weapon.
Could that be what we saw at the very beginning of what we now call the pandemic in China? People dropping dead on the streets. Yeah. Could that be a result of? Yeah. Is this what they call a direct energy weapon?
Yeah. It doesn't have to be. You'll notice, and I'm not getting too political here, but in China, the heaviest populated area of Muslims also has the heaviest concentration of 5G. And they're all becoming sick. I mean, it's a way to get rid of all of the Muslims out of your country. This is before we even start talking about HAARP and the 16 other things like it around the planet.
Totally.
When they shredded my PhD and banned me from the campus for 30 years, it's illegal without me being able to prove it, because I don't have the validation from the university anymore, that I cannot use the doctorate. And in this country, you cannot be an expert witness without a doctorate.
Oh.
So with all
that makes perfect sense.
With all of my experience, I'm the only one in the world with it.
But you can in Germany, the US, and in pretty much every other country.
If somebody marked it and said, we present you with a doctorate, if I had a doctorate from any other country, then I could, that is valid in this country, then I could use it. But it couldn't be a doctorate from the Women's Institute of China, it had to be a valid university. Yeah. But the moment they did that, I ceased to become an expert witness.
Oh.
And now they've taken the Queen out the chessboard straight away. And I cannot be an expert witness in this country.
Well,
I can in some other countries, they recognize me, but the first thing they say is, "Are you a doctor?" No. And well, my lord, you know. That's it. You know, we at least want a doctor caliber, but with all of mine, they took the main piece out of the chessboard. A very clever move.
not enough. Not good enough, though.
It didn't stop me.
No, obviously not.
Yeah, I'd like you to download my USB stick.
I will.
This is the one that proves everything about 5G and everything about women. And I couldn't write this on my own.
Is that your dissertation?
No. No, this is the paper I wrote just last year. This is the one that's been translated into
84 languages.
84 languages, and is being used. It's being used in court around the world. I know that.
So that's the centerpiece.
This is the centerpiece. This is my latest paper. But I got, I got my university lecturer, Professor Ollie Johansson for direction, the doctor for medical expertise, and he edited it, Joy, director of midwifery, Sylvia, who's a timeless researcher, my wife, pretty suffering me, and a top secretary. But this is it here. I'll put a paper clip on it. But there you are.
Thank you.
And I'll show you the relevant page. I've listed all the stages of the baby. Well, I've listed all the, here we are, all of the stages of the baby from an egg right the way through, and what's being, but there are several diagrams,
Yes,
several tables, and I've listed every frequency and how it affects different parts of the baby for the paper chip on this.
Yeah.
This was done without me, and this is the research. This is the research by the police. Saying I debriefed spine.
Wow.
I mean, they can't deny it.
This was the one that was done by the police without your knowledge. So this is your life, basically.
It's all my life.
Yeah. It's I can assure you that there are a lot of people out there who will join you in this fight. Thank you so far, and it's a pleasure and an honor to meet you in person. Okay. So for today, we'll call it quits. Again, I thank you very, very much, but tomorrow we're going to continue.